Of my life, I uh, received some weird responses from Chapter 5. I was going to rush by the 4 years of my activities in Santa Barbara once I left Pittsburgh, and I was reminded that, those were psychedelic years. So I will go back to 1972, and instead of Redding, California, like I did in Chapter 5, Chapter 6, the formative years, 1972 to 1976. I arrived April Fool's Day of 1972 in California. I was picked up at LAX by my biological father, and it was totally psychedelic. It was like I had never been in Southern California, and the vegetation slapped me in the face. Just the vegetation alone, let alone the architecture and the beautiful weather and everything else that goes along with Southern California. Anyway, that was 1972. That was before AIDS was popular. That was before herpes was here, genital herpes. And it was like, party on, dog. And I arrived in Santa Barbara at my brother's house. At that time, he's married to Erin. Prior to having David, and Barry was working, running his business, and he had just finished Brooks Institute School of Photography. I went ahead and stayed with them for, I think it was 2 months total, 60 god-awful days for Erin. But went ahead and spent 2 months with them, and in that 2-month period of time, had a job, had a place to live, had accounts established in my name, had a post office box, and lived at 1025 Olive Street at the Malabar Apartments. Those were 4 wonderful, great years. Great years. At that time, I was working at St. Francis Hospital at 601 East Mitchell-Turena Street in Santa Barbara. And I worked as an emergency room technician, and I worked as an orthopedic technician. And I also did orderly bedpan pushing too. And I also worked in the intensive care unit as a nurse's assistant. So I worked all over the hospital, really. It was great. The apartment was, I believe the rent was $175 a month, plus utilities. And my apartment was not visible from the street. It was behind large, broadleaf, beautiful bushes, trees, and it was it was unbelievable. The vegetation in Santa Barbara is great. They grow Cymbidium orchids wild there. It's just they grow everywhere. If you want them, you can get them. Eucalyptus trees are there. It smells just beautiful. If you know what eucalyptus is, eucalyptus oil. And Santa Barbara in 1972 is absolutely gorgeous. When I first moved to Santa Barbara, I thought maybe I'd go into the post office and work for the government for 20 years and retire pushing envelopes. And when I applied for a post office position, you needed a Purple Heart from Vietnam in order to get the job, which left me out, thank you Lord. Didn't need a Purple Heart, didn't need to go to Vietnam, and I didn't, thank you Lord. So instead I went into pushing bedpans, and I stayed there. Santa Barbara was a party-hardy town. It was psychedelic. I had met a bunch of people from work that I started to hang with. I met people through my sister-in-law's brother Victor B. And I was a straight kid my whole life, born and raised in this one horse town. And went ahead and went down to Summerlin Beach. I arrived April 1st, May. The end of May, there was a party on the beach in Summerlin, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into or getting myself out of, because when we got to the beach, there were like 300 people there, and they were all nude. Like, there's no clothes anywhere. That was the first time I had been exposed to a nude beach. I had been exposed to mass nudity, and I loved every second of it. It was just downright upright. It was wonderful. And these guys rented the beach, and they had a permit for the party, and the speakers were the size of the room that I'm sitting in, and they were hauled down on the beach, and up above was a generator and music and records and CD tapes. There were 300 people dancing on the beach, and it was a wonderful party. That was May of 1972. Here I am. I look around, I tell my brother-in-law Victor, I go, Brother Vic, I don't know if I can handle this situation. He says, well, you got to do what you got to do. So I proceeded to get inebriated, and I remember I met someone, and that was all that I had remembered. And the next day I woke up in Goleta, California. That was like about 18 miles north of from where the beach was, laying in this beautiful lady's bed. Had no idea what her name was, had no idea where I was. I knew my name, but those were some of the things that started to happen to me in 1972. So I hope my cousin Rhonda's happy, because she said chapter 5 was boring, and I looked back and it was kind of like, okay, I got to California and I was married and divorced in Santa Barbara, and then we left. Yeah, you're right, Rhonda. So it's, I don't want to leave out the good details, and there were 4 psychedelic years of details that I'm going to tell you. From the alley to Princeton University. And that's what I'll say about that. So I'm going to keep this real short, but I want everyone to know that I love you all. Thank you for watching, and it's going to get better. I'm not going to leave out any of the stories. Right on. Have a good night. Talk to you all soon. It's March 3rd, 2008. Have a good spring. Bye.